Star Wars didn't wait for the Empire to raise its dead, it started with the Sith. Before 7000 BBY, Sith King Dathka Graush turned Korriban's Valley of the Dark Lords into a tomb guarded by corpses that bit, spread, and never stopped standing watch. A ruler who wanted eternal service simply made death optional for the men serving it. That's why today I'm breaking down every major Star Wars zombie, plague, and reanimation in the galaxy, and what they were each really built to do, starting with the guard who died on duty and never left his post. Korriban zombies. The scariest grave in the galaxy had already stood for 7,000 years, and it's still open for business. 7,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, a Sith king solved his staffing problem by making his guards immortal. Not through the Force alone, through alchemy on a tomb world built for corpses, run by a man who never liked the idea of anything under his command retiring. His name was Dathka Graush, and his answer to security was permanent employment. Somewhere before 7000 BBY, he used Sith alchemy to raise the dead on Korriban and set them loose in the Valley of the Dark Lords, the burial ground where the galaxy's earliest Dark Lords were sealed into their tombs. Graush needed sentries who wouldn't sleep, wouldn't age, and wouldn't ask for a shift change in the next few millennia. So he built them out of corpses instead of soldiers. These weren't shambling props. Korriban zombies could think. They stalked the valley as semi-sentient predators, hunting anyone foolish enough to go treasure hunting in a Sith King's backyard. And they came with an upgrade that turns a guard duty into an infection. One bite from a Korriban zombie and a living victim joined the payroll, dragged into the same undead condition, patrolling the same tombs forever. Somewhere in that valley, there must have been a first person this ever happened to. Somebody who walked in still themselves and never walked out, their body reassigned to guard duty for a king they never met and never agreed to serve. That's the actual founding moment here. A ruler deciding a corpse still owes him labor. Every horror that follows in this galaxy is a redraft of that same idea. New author, better tools. Sith magic needs a sorcerer standing over the corpse, muttering the words, doing the work by hand. The next horror needed nobody at all, because it turned dying into something you could catch from a single bite in a dark tunnel. The Rakul Plague. One bite in a tunnel outside a Sith tomb turned into a crowd within days, and nobody had to say a single word of dark side ritual to make it happen. That is the part that separates this outbreak from the Sith-raised undead in Star Wars horror. The Sith King on Korriban needed presence, intention, a hand on the corpse. This plague needed a scratch. Rakuls come from the older expanded universe, and whatever dark sorcery first spawned them, the plague now spreads on its own. Victims get infected, their bodies twist into something feral and unrecognizable, and the transformation spreads through contact rather than command. A person walks into an ancient ruin, gets clawed, and within hours the person is gone. What is left still moves, it still hunts, it just doesn't recognize anyone it used to love, which is the same theft the Sith King committed on Korriban, except this time, the thief is a pathogen with no face and no throne. Fans often lump Rakuls in with zombies, and it is worth being precise about why that reading is only half right. A zombie in the classic sense is a corpse pulled back after death. A Rakul is very much alive, just alive as something else entirely, its mind erased and replaced by whatever the plague is wired to do. The infected mutant framing fits the evidence better than the reanimated corpse framing, even though the label zombie is close enough that many fans reach for it anyway. The outbreaks sit early in the horror chronology, well before the Empire ever put its own machinery behind the idea. That timing matters. It means the galaxy had already discovered mass undead, or something close enough to it, without a single sorcerer required to make it spread. The plague did the recruiting on its own, one exposure at a time, turning a single victim into a vector and a vector into a swarm. Contagion is blind, it takes anyone in reach. But the dark side kept returning to its older dream of a corpse that obeys a named master, a servant who answers to one voice from beyond the grave. Sith undead. A Sith Lord could lose a war, lose a body, lose everything, but the argument that mattered most to him. Nobody gets to quit working just because they died. That is the whole pitch behind Sith alchemy, a tradition of dark sorcery that could enhance weapons, engineer alien creatures, and, when a Sith Lord wanted it, raise corpses and put them back on duty. The plague turned people into a mindless swarm with zero chain of command. Sith alchemy solved that problem thousands of years earlier, using an entirely different method with an entirely different goal in mind. These are not living souls soldiers following orders they can still argue with, and they are not victims with a scrap of will left to resist. Legend sources describe reanimated corpses, dead flesh moved by somebody else's intention, standing post for a master who never has to worry about desertion again. The tombs on Korriban held this practice for thousands of years, which makes Sith undead one of the oldest horror traditions in the galaxy, older than clone troopers, older than the plague that would echo it millennia later. Darkside rituals raised guardians to stand watch over sacred ground long after the priests who built the ground were bones. Some of those reanimated corpses defended tombs. Some served as enforcers for Sith lords who wanted muscle that never asked for a cut of the loot. The job was simple. Stand there, obey. Keep obeying long after the body has nothing left to obey with. That is the part that turns this from spooky set dressing into doctrine. A plague steals a body because a body was standing nearby. Sith alchemy steals a body on purpose, as policy, because a dead servant never talks back, never asks for payment, and never deserts. Somewhere under every one of those tombstones is a person who had a name once, who wanted something, who is now furniture with a pulse of dark energy where a life used to be. Fans still argue about where the category ends. Wikipedia keeps Korriban's Tomb Guardians and the Catacomb Warriors of Dromund Kaas as separate entries with separate origins, but no single umbrella term covers every darkside reanimation trick across thousands of years of Legends material, treated as a spectrum of the same idea rather than a filing cabinet with clean folders. The Sith wanted the dead to serve a mind. The next horror flips that completely, a thing that keeps your body alive and takes the mind for itself, wearing you like a costume it never plans to remove. The Mungul Mungul. Somewhere in the deep corners of Star Wars lore sits an entity so alien that it rarely comes up even when fans argue about zombies in this galaxy. The Mungul Mungul grows by eating people from the inside and wearing what's left as part of a bigger, spreading mass. And once you understand how that process works, everything else in this video starts to look almost tame by comparison. That claim carries real weight, given everything covered already. That single distinction changes everything about how the theft works. Every corpse soldier and death-marked warrior discussed already needed a body to stop living first. The Sith trick was ownership after the fact, a mind gone, a shell repurposed, a funeral that already happened before the puppet strings got attached. This thing skips the funeral entirely. The Mungul Mungul infects a living victim and takes over from within, folding that person's body into itself while the heart is still beating. It absorbs the person directly, consuming them from within while they still live, and once they are dead, it wears what remains as a visibly hollow shell. Whoever they were, whatever they wanted, gets consumed along with the flesh, and the mass just keeps expanding outward, victim by victim, a single being that spreads through countless bodies like a colony. Add that to the list of ways this galaxy can end you. That's a worse fate than anything the Sith ever engineered. Ownership after death is horrifying, because a person's history gets stolen after they're already gone, filed away and rewritten once there's nobody left to argue back. This is horrifying because the theft happens while the person is still alive, their body taken from them before they even fall. Documentation on the Mungul Mungul outside deep lore corners is thin, and that scarcity is a big part of why it barely registers in mainstream conversations about undead Star Wars. The scarcity itself becomes part of the mystery, feeding speculation in comment sections and forums. Even among fans who do know the name, there's real disagreement about whether it counts as a zombie at all, since it operates as a hive infection rather than classic necromancy. What the lore actually confirms is a parasitic hive process with no raised corpse anywhere in it, which is exactly the detail fueling that argument. What survives in the lore is enough to place it among the strangest, least human threats the franchise has ever produced. A horror built less around death and more around erasure, one victim at a time, with no clean line left between the person and the thing wearing them. A mass that swallows you whole is one nightmare. There is a smaller one that fits in a jar and crawls in near the back of your head, letting your friends watch your face give the orders it now wants. Geonosian brainworms. Your best friend is standing right in front of you, talking in his own voice, and a creature the length of your forearm is steering every word of it. That is the pitch behind the Geonosian brainworm, and it is somehow more disturbing than anything a hive mind or an ancient plague pulled off earlier in this list. Forget mass casualties. This is one parasite, one host, total control. The infestation works by entering through the nasal passage and wiring itself directly into the host's brain. From there, it drives the body like a rental car, walking it, talking it, aiming its weapon when it needs to. The heart still beats, the lungs still breathe, the body's vital functions continue, keeping the host outwardly alive, and making the infestation almost impossible to detect until it is too late. Compare that to the Mungul Mungul, a mass so big it swallowed entire settlements whole. The brainworm skips the spectacle entirely. It does not need a crowd or a body count to make its point. One host, quietly hollowed out from the inside, standing next to you at a checkpoint or across a table, is the entire operation. That is the real escalation happening across this video. The Blackwing corpses needed a virus in a battlefield. This needs a single worm and enough patience to finish the job. Fans still argue about whether this counts as a zombie story at all, since the host never dies and never transforms into something else. Fair point on paper, but strip away the label and look at what actually happens to the person underneath. The worm seizes control of their mind, suppressing their will while their body keeps moving on command. Someone else is answering when their name gets called, and the horror of the idea is that the person who used to live in that skull may still be in there, powerless to resist a single word coming out of their own mouth. One worm hijacks one body at a time. The next power skipped the hijacking entirely and went straight for the battlefield, raising the already dead by the hundreds with a chant sung from across a valley. The Night Sister dead. Picture a battlefield where the losing side just keeps getting up. Not one corpse. Rows of them standing at attention waiting for a word. That word is a song. Dathomiri witches don't dig, don't stitch, don't touch the body at all. They stand at a distance and sing the chant of resurrection, and the dead answer it like a roll call. Most earlier horrors worked victim by victim, a parasite in one skull, a plague through one bloodstream. This is the moment that math changes, because the Night Sisters raise the same trick to a battalion in one performance. No infection curve required. The Ahsoka finale put this on screen in live action. Fallen troopers, already dead, rising back into formation under Night Sister power and marching because a witch decided they should. That's the detail that separates this from every shambling corpse trope you've ever seen. These dead keep discipline, they hold lines, they follow orders like the person giving commands still matters more than the fact that they stopped breathing. Fans do split hairs over the label here, and the split is fair. Some call this pure zombie horror, others call it magically reanimated soldiery, a different genre wearing the same rotted face. Plenty of fans still file it under Star Wars Zombies anyway, because the behavior matches corpse walking, corpse fighting, corpse taking orders, and the argument over the name doesn't change what's standing in the field. Fans also draw a hard line between this and Sith alchemy, and the line matters. This is Dathomiri witchcraft, a tradition with its own rules, its own price, its own song. Same result as the plagues and the parasites, a person converted into inventory after death, but a completely different door used to get there. Somewhere under that armor is still someone who had a name before the chant found him, a soldier whose fight ended once and got scheduled for overtime anyway. Witchcraft did this with a voice and a ritual older than living memory. An empire that measured victory in credits and kill counts may well have looked at that outcome and wondered a colder question: why pay a witch, or wait for a song when the same result might be grown in a lab and released to spread on its own? Project Blackwing. A stormtrooper picked up his rifle, checked his sights, and opened fire on his own squad, and the thing pulling the trigger had died 3 hours earlier. That is the Blackwing virus in one image. Imperial researchers called it the Blackwing virus, or simply the sickness, born out of a program called Project Blackwing that was chasing something far bigger than a weapon. The stated goal was immortality itself, cheating death at the cellular level, and the Empire found a shortcut so ugly it had to bury the paperwork. Later, Imperial scientists rediscovered the same pathogen and this time built it into a weapon on purpose. The origin traces back to Darth Dreer and Sith alchemy, dark experiments in cheating death that predate the Empire by centuries. Imperial researchers found that thread, pulled on it, and turned ancient corpse magic into a lab strain with a batch number. That is the same crime from the very first entry in this story, a Sith king raising soldiers by hand, except now it runs through a pipette instead of a ritual. The outbreak hit a prison transport ship first, in the incident documented in Death Troopers, when infected stormtroopers turned on the crew in the dead of space with nowhere to run. It resurfaced later on Dendoran, a second outbreak proving the strain never actually died out, just went dormant waiting for the right host. The genuinely disturbing part is not the biting, it is the learning. The virus could communicate cell to cell across its hosts, an infection with something resembling a shared nervous system, and it eventually figured out how to work machinery and fire weapons through the bodies it controlled. Every trooper who died on that ship stopped being a person and became a component. And the fear was never just for the men still breathing. It was for the ones already gone, still standing post, still following a chain of command that no longer needed their permission. Fans still argue over which version even counts as the true Blackwing story, the 2009 novel, or the later Imperial bioweapon references that echo it. Follow the pattern across both, and the through line holds regardless of which text you crown canon. A plague that thinks is scarier than a plague that just spreads. A virus that arms its own dead is a nightmare the Empire could barely control. The final horror needed no lab and no pathogen, only a song and a garrison of soldiers who already gave their lives for the men who now own them. Night Troopers. The Great Mothers stand over Thrawn's fallen ranks at Peridea, speak the old words, and the formation gets back up, ready to keep fighting. Most of those troopers were alive the whole time, energized by Night Sister magic. Some had died in the fighting minutes earlier, and the ritual pulled them back up alongside the living. That's the scene Star Wars gave audiences in Ahsoka, and it's the cheapest, cruelest punchline in the whole franchise. Thrawn's forces at Peridea include troopers energized, and in some cases, reanimated through Night Sister magic into Night Troopers. Enchanted infantry wearing the same armor, holding the same formations they held in life. The Empire spent the equivalent of a galaxy's GDP building a station that could crack planets in half. The witches on Peridea needed a chant and a body count. This is the image the entire video has been circling since the Sith King carved a stone guardian to outlast his own name. Night Troopers pull that same ambition out of legend and put it in live action, in the actual mainline canon, not just a comic panel or an old novel. The reanimation runs on Night Sister ritual, a major source of the undead imagery that has haunted this franchise for years. Blackwing soldiers ran on an engineered plague. The mechanism changes, the appetite stays identical. Fans quickly noticed the pattern and started asking if Star Wars is building toward a zombie horror thread it's willing to keep pulling, and the evidence backs that reading up. Much of the franchise's undead lore lived quietly in legends for years, but the Clone Wars had already put reanimated Geonosians on screen, and now a marquee live-action show put reanimated soldiers front and center. Fan forums lit up with Blackwing comparisons, still tracing the split between a lab origin and a spell. Strip away the lightsabers and the hyperspace lanes, and you're left with the same transaction every entry in this video has made. A soldier died doing what he was told. Someone with power decided that was a resource, not an ending, and put the body back to work holding a line it can't choose to abandon. The Death Star was the Empire's expensive answer to keeping the galaxy in line. The Night Troopers are the honest one. A corpse never files a complaint and never deserts, and in a sense, that compliant, deathless soldier is the grim ideal every Sith King's ambition, every plague's horror, and every witch's ritual seem to be circling. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.